Yesterday, we talked about some of the top wings. Today, we're going over some of the top bigs in this class with several different skill sets. Coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board. What is up? My name is Richard Stayman. You probably know me better as @MavsDraft on Twitter. I am joined by Leif Thulin yet again today. We are going over some of the top bigs. But first, want to thank everybody who continues to listen to us as the draft gets closer, making us your first listen of the day. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to Leif, James, Rafael, all of us here at the Locked On Network. Really means a lot. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So yesterday we talked about a few wings that we thought were a little bit diverse in their skill set and a little bit different and unique. Today we're going to talk about just in general some of the top bigs. We're going to break down some of them from Alexandre Sarr to Oso Ighodaro, guys that are, Alexandre Sarr is the number one projected pick. Oso may not get drafted. So we're going to cover a lot of different guys. But Leif, of this group, before we dive into any of them in particular, who is your favorite to watch? Like who truly just moves you when you watch? You're like, okay, this guy is different from everybody else.
I would say Clingan, just because the team was amazing, made it enjoyable to watch him play because he knew his role to a T. Offensively, he was more of a distributor or a dunker than someone who's got this enticing skill set. And then defensively, he changed everything. So he's the one I definitely saw the most of and enjoyed watching. But that's just me being a lover of basketball itself, and UConn was an enjoyable watch. The one that intrigues me the most, though, would be Yves Missi because he kind of has these moments where you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's different than everyone else on this basketball court. But there's just a lot of like Jekyll and Hyde with him where he shows these great moments, but he has a fair amount of freshman lulls.
Yeah, Yves Missi is somebody we'll talk about. I got some mixed feelings on him. I think that middle group of him and Kel'el Ware is going to be a really fun one. But let's dive into it with the top two bigs. We got Alex Sarr and Donovan Clingan. Let's start with Sarr. So for those who don't know him, he went over he's from France, went over to OTE last year, moved to the NBL in Australia. He's 7'1", 205 pounds, had a decent year, didn't rebound very well, only 4.5 rebounds a game, but had 9.5 points per game, 1 assist, a block and a half. This is all in about 18 minutes. So actually per 36, you can pretty much double what I just said. And that's what it comes out to. So pretty good numbers. The 3-ball didn't fall, but he took 2 a game and he was shooting 28%. He shot 71% from the line. So there's something to work with there. 71 for a big man is like fine. It's not anything great. It's not bad. But he's really smooth. He's a great athlete. He showcased himself against the G League in a scrimmage. It was Alex Sarr versus Ron Holland was the advertised matchup. They're starting to do that every year as long as the G League was around, with Wembanyama versus Scoot, and now Sarr versus Holland. Sarr really came onto the scene, and that's where that number one talk really started. So, Leif, what do you think of Sarr? What are your thoughts on him, and do you have him number one?
I have him number one right now. I'm not dead set on it, but the reason I like Sarr is because defensively, I think he can be among the best. Like his comparisons that are most often floated around are Defensive Player of the Year of the previous season of Jaren Jackson Jr. and a guy who I deem to be a better defender even than Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jonathan Isaac, who just hasn't played a ton. So that those guys both protect the rim and have the versatility to slide their feet. So I think that really moves him up in terms of, okay, at least on one side of the basketball, he's going to be a very big impact. Offensively, his skill set's a little bit raw. But what you saw when he went against the G League, where you were kind of expecting it to be Holland and Buzelis' show, it was Alex Sarr's show. He was the best player in that game. Offensively, he was able to play against people of his own size, stature, and age, most importantly, and look the part as opposed to some of those pedestrian-looking numbers. So I think production-wise, it makes me hesitant to take a guy with the lack of enormous numbers. But skill set wise, I do have him up there. I think my top two are Sarr and Dillingham for very different reasons. And part of it is the rebounding lack that you're seeing there. Is if you're a big, I don't know. I think he wants to be a wing, but he's in a big boy's body. And sometimes those guys end up amazing. And sometimes you don't have that edge that sometimes the bigs need.
Yeah, I mean, I think it paints, you have to paint the context too, which is he played next to another big over at Perth, and it's a very physical league, and I don't think he was necessarily up to par for that. So I do think that is important to consider, but good rebounders make it work. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, your Utah Jazz, I would say, have two pretty good rebounders, like have had it. Somebody, John Collins, who has flirted with double-digit rebounds in the past, and then they also have, Walker Kessler. Like that is stuff, like just as a regular example, like that stuff exists all throughout the league. So you have to make it work. That's his kind of adjustment he has to have. And rebounding usually is the most one-to-one like translation, I would say, of any skill. The jump shot, I fully buy. I don't think it's necessarily going to be great ever, but it's going to be good enough to stretch the floor truly. I think the thing with me is he moves the like, just if you're looking at him, the person he reminds me the most of just in terms of how he looks on the floor is DeAndre Ayton, but he has such a better motor. He's not the same player, but like that smoothness to his game really is there. The same way he slides his feet, he has a little bit of a jump shot that Ayton teased in college, but that really hasn't gotten much better. And I think that's something where if you got that archetype, though, you take that number one, especially in a weak draft, almost every time. So I think he is somebody absolutely worth that lottery ticket. If he grows those ball skills, I think he really, really could hit a high ceiling there.
I'm with you there. And just to transition us to Donovan Clingan, I think Clingan's appeal is not to be a number one option offensively. That's why he's probably not seen as the same prospect. But defensively, even though Sarr is compared to some of the upper echelon defenders in the entire NBA, I think Donovan Clingan factors into how your defense in the NBA is set as a whole by like team wide. He can play drop coverage and disrupt everything, change your shot chart. And then offensively, the intelligence displayed running a critical spot in UConn's elaborate offensive scheme, I think, is really helping his stock as opposed to just being a lob catcher and someone who is a back to the basket guy who can only punish switches. He's got strong feet, tries to dunk everything. Once he got his foot feeling better, his lift looked better, and I think that changed the trajectory of UConn's season because they were winning without him, with Samson Johnson starting playing hedge coverage. Well, they were able to become one of the more defensively dominant teams in the tournament and in all of college basketball because he changes every shot. And I think in the NBA he can do the same thing, a la Walker Kessler, maybe even a little bit better because I think he's bigger than Kessler is. And he runs the floor really well. So he's an energy guy through and through. So their skill sets are different. It's not someone I want at the number one pick, but I think he's safely going to go in the top 10 because on one side of the ball, he can lock down the entire defense.
Yep. Yeah, he's the best rim, really paint deter in the class. Like he controls the paint. In college, it's a lot easier because there's no defense at three in the key, but it's things that translate, right? It's the way he shades the ball. It's the way he rotates. It's the way he doesn't really lose track of the ball handler, plus his spot on the floor, I think is really important as a big man. I really like his game. And I think, actually I'll ask it. I'll use it as a question. What do you think is, these are the two most common criticism I've heard of him. So there are really three. So one, how do you think he defends in isolation? Two, do you trust him to really score that much? Is he just going to be going off of like lobs and quick scoring situations near the rim? And three, I've heard stuff about like, oh, he doesn't have a left hand. What do you think of that? So that was a lot to hammer in there, but bring us home with that.
I don't think he's going to score a lot, but I do think he can score energy points. Like he will score running in transition. He will score as a vertical lob threat. So I'm not overly deterred by that. In terms of his defending in isolation, I don't think he'll have to be put into isolation and switches because I think he's going to be an exclusively drop coverage big. And if you mean defending posts in isolation, he guarded Zach Edey pretty well. I mean, Edey got his, but that's someone that's an anomaly even in the NBA. And it's someone that I think deterred him well, and Edey just made difficult shots. But if on the perimeter, he's going to get beat, but he recovers and he influences shots. You saw that countless times at UConn. And then lastly, I don't think his left hand's good. I don't think he's got like a left hand jump hook, but you've seen him finish with the left hand. And one of my favorite things about him is he doesn't put it up to chance with his left hand. He tries to dunk everything. I don't like when bigs go up and try to use finesse when they've got the size and athletic ability to not use finesse. So I actually prefer that he continues to just dunk the ball with two hands.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I personally think some of that's overblown, especially at the lack of like a go-to move. Like his drop step is killer. Like if he gets any form of a switch, that drop step is unstoppable. So I actually really buy that. Um, I have these two guys as my top two bigs, and they're both in my top six. I have Clingan number 6, so and Sarr number 1. So that says a lot. Like size is going to matter in this class, hence why we're talking about a lot of these bigs. So then, and we're going to be talking about some more, such as Kel'el Ware and Yves Missi. But first, let me tell you about DoorDash. Leif, I'm sure you know this, considering that we're going to the combine on Mother's Day. But Mother's Day is coming around. It's around the corner. Have you bought your Mother's Day gift yet?
Not yet.
You, well, I have something for you, Leif. I can save you here. Did you know that DoorDash is able to deliver Mother's Day gifts, such as, any tech gifts, bouquets, anything like that, any essentials, self-care essentials? You can get it delivered right to her door. So while you're at the airport, leaving her for the NBA draft, you can deliver it through DoorDash. So I don't know if like your mom has sweet tooth, anything like that, but you can get her candies, tech enthusiast, anything like that. You can find almost anything deliverable through DoorDash. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience store, grocery, or retail order now with code Locked On NBA. That's Locked On NBA, like the Locked On NBA show, all one word. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting that goes on those networks? Make sure to switch over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels apps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Leif, we are talking about some of these bigs. I know you. I'll just dive into it. Kel'el Ware, he is probably the most polarizing player in the entire draft. For those who don't know, he was I want to say he was a McDonald's All-American. I need to double check that.
He was.
But he was. He then went on to play in the FIBA U18s with, it was just in the Americas. It was a pretty easy competition. From there, motor flags started popping up. Then a month or two later, he went to Oregon. Some motor stuff popped up there before the season. And then in the season, it was very obvious. He played 16 minutes a game. Some of those minutes, he was pretty disinterested. He transfers to Indiana, and he takes off. He looks more like the prospect that we were advertised as. But you see in the Big Ten tournament, I can't remember which game it was. I think it was the last game they played. But he almost seems to just have given up on the game midway through in the most important game of the season for Indiana. And that becomes a common theme. I personally have heard bad things through intel about his motor, that it's just something that's unfixable. It's just who he is, and it's going to really cost him on draft night. I'm not very in on him. What do you think of his game, and what do you take of the motor issues?
Well, you'll remember this probably, but we talked about our favorite prospects heading into 2 seasons ago's draft and then what prospects were coming in. And I was like, well, this Kel'el Ware kid's fascinating, but something's just not right. And I'd hardly watched high school ball from that year. And then he goes and plays at Oregon, and he has one numerically impressive game. But I watched it, and I was like, yes, I know he had these stats, but did it matter in this course of the game? And I remember kind of being like people on Twitter and YouTube telling me, okay, well, he's really talented. And I was like, you're not telling me anything I don't know here, but there's something off. Well, anyway, if the fact that he has to be defended in press conferences by his new team, it's like, well, that's an Oregon thing. It's not happening at Indiana. Like, he's not a hard worker. Well, now we're going to make him one. Like, they're not saying, oh, that's just misconstrued. Concerns me. As for his play at Indiana, I don't think it was a great fit because they were asking him to be a true stretch 5, stretch 4, however you want to put it, because he's playing alongside Malik Renew. And I really wish you'd seen him operate as the sole big for a fair evaluation, because I don't think he's a 4. I think he's a 5 at the next level. He rebounded pretty well. He put up solid numbers. I made this point with Rafael's. You can't change a person's stripes, or it's often talked about like an animal, but his stripes are there. Like he doesn't work terribly hard, and his skill set is alluring, but he doesn't make that many shots. Like, what's alluring is he's got touch at that size. What's alluring is he gets a lot of blocks, but how many are there of like impactful change the shots but didn't block it? So I think he's a little bit of a stat patter, but I do think his skill set's better than some of the guys ranked ahead of him. Like, if we talk about Missi, or I mean, for instance, another guy on this list lower, DaRon Holmes, I'm lower on, but he's far more productive. But the skill set and talent wise, Kel'el Ware is far more desirable. So I have him in my 20s, and I think that's low based on talent for this draft. But I just don't trust a player that has so many glaring red flags in terms of energy and effort. And a lot of bigs at the NBA level are effort players. That's how they carve out their roles. And unless you're one of those guys like Joel Embiid, who also plays hard, like, but like if you have his skill set, fine. Like, you can get away with not playing hard every possession, but not many do. And if you're not going number one in this class, you don't have those skills. So I that's a bother for me because you have to work hard.
Yeah, and we're not talking about somebody who's taking one of every like 10 plays off. Like, it's not necessarily even that he's taking plays off. It's really that one, like, you notice it in game when he's disinterested, it's contagious, and like that stuff scares NBA teams. But also it's a lot of behind the scenes, which is where development happens. Like, that's where, toxins come into play for teams, like, not calling him one, but like other players in the past have 100% been that, where their toxic habits, like they're, just red flags spread to the team. And it comes like a something stinks situation. And that stuff happens very much commonly in the NBA, especially on bad teams. So if he's not drafted to the right culture, I think he's really in trouble. It's tough too, because you brought up like the jump shot, right? Like, he doesn't need to shoot. Like, I think that's something that's also just in general. I don't think every big needs to shoot. Like, if you can't shoot, hey, maximize your game elsewhere. But he's also not going to play with, the hardest energy for the entire, 20, I was going to say 24 hours, but like 100% of the game. Like, he just doesn't do that. And that's really what concerns me, is can you actually have that guy playing 20 minutes a game, right? Like, is he going to play all those minutes hard, or do you have to worry about him, losing his cool and then something bad happens? It's bad for the team. Also, could he be like, I mean, this is really extreme, but like, I don't think it's even out of the realm of possibilities from the things I've heard behind the scenes, is like, could he be another Larry Sanders? That really scares me, where he had all the talent in the world, signs an extension, boom, he's retired. That's really the red flag for him. So there's a lot around him. If the red flags weren't there, I'd say he's probably a top 10 to 15 pick pretty safely. But that it really matters. I'd be shocked if he went before 25. Honestly, I'd be shocked if he gets a guaranteed contract at 30, before 30. But
I think someone will think they can teach the skills into being a valuable player, because skill set wise, I think he's a top 10 player in the class.
Yeah,
I personally don't like it that way, but I think there's gonna be some team that thinks, hey, we can make him work, because you're not gonna pass on that level of talent. So it's really fit dependent. But yeah, I have my reservations.
Yeah. Well, let's move to the next guy. Somebody who I think we're both a little bit higher, and there's no at this point, there's no red flags on anything with this, and that is Yves Missi. You've watched a ton of Baylor, honestly, probably more than me. And I live in Texas. You live in Utah. Talk about Yves Missi and what you like about him, and what potential downfalls he has.
What I like about Missi is you didn't expect him to do anything. He worked his way into the starting role, into a potential lottery pick based on natural traits, but the effort was there. Like, he worked super hard on becoming a more skilled player, and you saw at the end of the season, he had the ball in his hands, he was dribbling between his legs, his feet are really good. He's kind of reminiscent of some players that didn't play much basketball but grew up playing other sports, and their footwork was not basketball catered, but they had just natural foot speed and foot agility and coordination. And like, obviously Embiid's the big one, like, or Akeem Olajuwon as someone who just had a ton of footwork ability, but just had to cater it to basketball. I'm not saying he's that, but what I do notice is you can see him run like a deer as a rim runner. You can see him elevate as a lob threat or a rim protector. And that's not what intrigues me the most. What intrigues me the most is he can switch a little bit, even though I think he'll be predominantly a drop big. I think with the ball in his hands, he's got decent footwork. I think he's a untapped finisher, because I think he goes up strong, but he doesn't know how good he is at exploding to the rim. Like, sometimes he goes up and he's way above the rim and he lays the ball up and he almost blocks himself. I think the thing that encourages me the most about Missi is there's so much good already, but I don't even feel like he's close to scratching his surface. And I know that's a way of saying he's raw, and maybe the teams that are looking to compete now wouldn't take Missi. But I think there's a lot of teams that'll say, wow, this guy wasn't supposed to play a ton. He was a near double-double guy on a good basketball team. It was a 3 seed, and he emerged as their best basketball prospect at the end of the year over Jacoby Walter, who was more heralded, more touted in every regard. So I'm pretty high on Yves Missi. And I think he and Donovan Clingan will be the best 2 rim protectors from this class.
Yeah, I think I see Missi a little bit more as a rim runner than a rim protector personally. I think in a best case, he does end up there. But I see him as like an energy big. I think for him, my issue is just like kind of like you said, he knows he's very athletic and he uses it too much. Like on the defensive end, he really hunts blocks the same way that he tries almost too hard to go like way above the rim, and he finds himself so high up that it throws him off, like you said. So I also just don't think he has much offensive skill. You're really hoping he's a great defender. Otherwise, his value as a pick and roll big and rim runner, it's kind of diminished. I think it's hard to project a lot of upside in him, but I think he is somebody that for sure has a place in the league as he gets just under NBA development.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll push back on is I think the skill is learning how and when to do the things. I think he's got the capacity to do a lot of different things offensively, but he's never going to be your offensive threat. But I wonder if he can be a short roll guy because he's got really good feet. He can catch and distribute as he learns more. But he's one of those guys who feels like he's learning the game on the fly, and sometimes the thinking slash like, oh, I'm going to think and I'm going to be an athlete, and you can only do one of the two at the time. I think once he puts it together mentally, the physical tools are all there more so than just about anyone in this class. So that's why I have
That's
faith.
fair.
But I do think there's a lower immediate floor.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Well, let's talk about some of the other guys on the other end. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, all of that on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So again, we are doing top bigs. So far, we've covered Alexandre Sarr, Donovan Clingan, Kel'el Ware, Yves Missi. We got 3 more for you. We're going to power through these next 3. So let's start. We'll get to Edey in a minute, but let's start with DaRon Holmes. He's the third highest big on my board. So for those who don't know him, actually, let me just give you a background. He is from Dayton, University of Dayton, third-year player. Was on the radars, I would say, as a freshman. He came from Arizona Compass, one of the biggest prep schools in the country. Immediately was really effective. I think he was the freshman player of the year. I know he's on the he was the rookie of the year for the A-10. Last year, he tested the water after a really dominant year. Jump shot didn't look so great. Leif and I saw it up close at the combine. He returns, thinks he can get a first-round pick. It was a pretty controversial return. This year, he just only gets better. He averages 20 points a game, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, only 2 turnovers. And also, they ran one of the slowest offenses in the entire league. So his per 100 possession numbers were incredible. Almost 40 points per 100 possessions, which is elite. The problem is he's a bit of a misfit. Like, there's no really way to describe it. I am still high on him because I think he's so smart and has such a just way of finding things in the right play with the ball in his hands that he'll translate to any role. But Leif, I know you're kind of skeptical. What do you think of DaRon?
I think he's a splendid person. I just want to say that at the start because we met him briefly at the combine. He seemed very nice, but everyone's nice there. But I also saw him at the March Madness this year. He was in Salt Lake, and I was walking to get some food outside of the arena, and I saw him not just where you'd be like, oh, there's some fans here, maybe there's some people. He was walking outside the concourse of the arena signing jerseys for Dayton fans, and with ice bags on his knees. So like the guy was going out of his way and helping people out after a miraculous win over Nevada. So I've just got the utmost respect for him as a player, as a person. As a player, I think he's really productive. Like, there's no denying that his numbers are really good. He was a second-team All-American, but I don't see it at all because he's not a 4 and he's not a 5 at the NBA. Okay, he plays the 5 for Dayton, and they play extremely slowly, and they play pick and roll, but their guards don't really help him at all. So he ends up getting the ball on the block, and he has to create a lot. So he is a very good passer because that's how they get a lot of good shots for their shooters. He's got skills around the hoop. He finishes, but he's not a huge. He blocks shots, but he's not a big time athlete. To me, he's slow. He's like very slow compared to NBA players. So that makes me think, okay, he's a center. Well, he doesn't have the physicality, and he doesn't put on the weight to be a center, and he's not a rim runner, a rim roller. And then if like you look at his numbers, you're like, okay, his numbers as a shooter are pretty good, but I don't have that much faith in his shot because it's a slow release. And he's not an end-to-end kind of twitchy energy guy either. He's the trailer on every single play for Dayton. He never leads the play. He sets a pick every single play, and they play through him. But he doesn't change ends of the floor. He doesn't vertically contest shots. It's all about his intangibles. And I love that typically about a player. Like, he knows how to play, but there's just an athletic thing lacking for him. And it makes me really hesitant to make a first round pick on a guy that I don't think can play the 5 and I don't think should play the 4.
Yeah, I hear the athletic concerns. One of my big notes is that like he doesn't do a great job of keeping balance, especially against contact at the rim. There was one game in particular, Loyola Chicago. It was close to the end of the regular season where shot after shot, he was just completely off balance, no lift, things like that. And I hear that. But I actually think when you put him in the NBA context, a lot of that changes the spacing, the tempo. I think his game will pop and he just makes everybody else around him better. Like you said, the intangibles are really strong. I haven't evaluated anybody better in terms of like just pure fundamentals as a big, with the way he catches the ball, the high hands, right? The way he rolls out of the screen, just everything he does is extremely thought out and just drilled into his head about, not thought out, but just like it just comes naturally to him. And I do think that's where I'm at, is I kind of think whatever he does, he's going to scale into that role because he's so smart. And that's what smart players do. And yes, like he isn't a center. He's kind of not a power forward, but I think in the NBA, he's just a big that can wear a bunch of different hats. So I really like him. I know we disagree on that, but I think we might agree on the next two guys. Let's start with Zach Edey. Zach Edey is the most polarizing player in the entire draft, I would say, actually, outside of Kel'el Ware. But Edey is more polarizing because he's 7'4". Like, you look at him and everybody has an opinion on a 7'4" guy. You think, like, I remember Taco Fall 5 years ago, same thing. It was like everybody wanted to talk about because he was a giant. He averaged 25 and 12. This is Edey, 2 assists. 2 blocks. He had double-digit free throws per game, and he hit a lot of those free throws. What do you think of Edey and his translation to the NBA?
I don't love it. I think that he's a better conditioned athlete than a lot of people who say, oh, he's just going to lumber up and down and the pace of the game will be too much for him. I do think there's a grain of truth to that, but I do think that if you play him in spurts as opposed to the 39 minutes a game he played practically in the tournament when they played anyone worth their salt, I think what he can do well is he'll clog up the paint, he'll rebound the ball, and you can have a secondary kind of offense going through him because no teams are going to be equipped to guard 7'4" and 300 pounds that barrel into you and shoot jump hooks and do so with a great frequency and percentage. So I think there is a place, but I wouldn't use that very high of a pick. I've heard people talk about him as a lottery talent because of sheer production. I don't see that. I think what he can do well is he can rebound. I think he can change shots because you're not used to finishing near a 7'4", but the pace disincentivizes me from picking him higher because he's only like a spurt player. Like, he's not going to be able to play as much as you think because the pace of the NBA is significantly faster than college, but not only faster than college, faster than what Purdue's elaborately schemed around Zach Edey playing was.
Yeah. I mean, plain and simple question here. Do you see him ever starting more than 41 games in a year?
Probably not, unless injury.
Yeah, that's it. Same here. I would not take somebody unless, like, you got Lou Will, that you knew, like, you had a crystal ball that you know is not going to start many games, but he's 6th man of the year. That'd be the only way I ever take a bench player in the lottery. Like, that to me, it would be like, I get it. If you're Oklahoma City, you need that big guy to bruise next to Chet. Edey fits that, but you could easily get that at 20. I'm just not a fan of putting him lottery. I personally think he should be an end of the first round pick. Like, fine, if you want to give him a guaranteed contract to be a tall guy. Like, I mean, this might come as a shock, but Boban Marjanovic averaged 20 minutes a game in a series against the Clippers in 2021. So, like, he could get on the court, but I feel like he's easily shakeable on the perimeter. Give him a hezzy, he's out of the play. I will say this though. His jump shot is going to be surprising people. Like it is touch. He's not going to be out there taking threes probably, but I think he's going to shoot some mid-range jumpers because at Purdue, he had no reason to ever do so. I think at the NBA, keep defenses honest. You have so many possessions. He doesn't need to be at the rim all the time. He also won't be at the free throw line taking jumpers all the time, but occasionally to keep defenses honest, I think he might do it. So overall, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb across. Where would you put Zach Edey?
I've got him just outside my first round, but I expect him to be a first rounder.
Yeah, that's really similar to me. He's my first non-first round grade because I think he's going to get so many chances being tall. And also, like, he's skilled for his size. Like, there's no denying that. It's just, again, we question the translation of Edey. The last guy, this is also somebody who has a very weird translation to the NBA, and that is Oso Ighodaro from Marquette. So, quick little rundown on Oso. He's probably the best big man passer. Stop me if I'm missing somebody in the class. You won't find anybody better probably for a couple years, at least at running give and goes than him, I would say, and finding backdoor cuts. Like, he is smooth and throwing passes through tight windows. A lot of it is system passes and plays and things like that. And he also doesn't shoot, and he really doesn't finish well at he doesn't dunk. He's not very above the rim. And yeah, he doesn't shoot. He doesn't really dunk. And he doesn't play a lot of defense. He doesn't protect the rim a ton. He's a very weird player, but here's how I look at it. And then, Leif, I'll let you give your rundown. If the Warriors or somebody similar where the entire offense is predicated on off-ball movement drafts him, he's worth a first-round pick. Like, he's a top 30 player, easily. But if someone where, I don't know, like the Clippers, right, where it's a lot of iso ball, or the Mavs even, if something like that, I would hate to see that. I think it's a waste of his talent. You got to put him on a system that's predicated on off-ball movement. What do you think of Oso and his translation?
I agree with the take on the Warriors in the sense that off-ball movement, it allows him to hit back cuts, and he can be kind of a pseudo, not even close to what Draymond does, but in the sense of like he catches it at the mid post and he diagnoses it.
Yeah.
I think he'd be very good with a team that prioritizes short rolling because that's what he did best at Marquette. So I do think the Mavs, if he short rolled with Luka and then made decisions, kicked out to the weak side, maybe throw lobs to the dunker spot, he could be really good at that. So I think his appeal is you need to find a team that can afford a smaller center because you have other big players that help on the glass, because he's not a bad rebounder, but he's not going to excel as one. I think he's actually a decent jumper, but it takes him a bit to load up. He's got a bad jump shot, but he's got a really good push shot. So you need a team that's friendly to the way that he plays, because like if you're going to rule out the push shot, a la like what Brandon Clark does, and starts shooting jump shots, then Ighodaro is far less impactful offensively. But if you let him shoot his push shot, pass, and he'll play super hard. So I've got him just outside my first round. He's in a similar range to Edey for me. But they're very different players and they fit very different schemes. So they're interesting. Like the whole center class or just bigs in general, I think there's a lot of debate that should be had because depending situation, different players will thrive.
Yeah, agreed with all of that. Well, we've covered 7 bigs. Let's do something to close this out real quick. I'll go first, give you some time on this because this is a pop quiz for Leif. Let's rank the 7 players we talked about. I'll start first. Yeah, I saw that reaction. So I'll start first. Number 1, Alex Sarr. Number 2, Donovan Clingan. Number 3, I have DaRon Holmes. Again, he's number 12 on my board. Yves Missi, he's number 13. So I would say that's the safe top 4. After that, I have Edey at 29. Then I have Kel'el Ware at 47. And then I have Oso Ighodaro at 51. What's your 7?
All right. I've got Sarr, Clingan, Missi, Ware. And then I think I have Oso Ighodaro, Zach Edey, and DaRon Holmes within 2 spots of each other.
Holmes is last.
So, well,
man.
I don't think that one's very well defined. Like if I find it on my big board, they're all within 2 spots. So
yeah,
those final 3, I think I have DaRon just a touch of ahead of Oso, but the more I think about it, I like Oso more. So if I were to do it right now, I'd go Sarr, Clingan, Missi, Ware, Ighodaro, Edey, Holmes.
Wow, we're gonna have to. Fun story. Leif and I are rooming together at the combine. if Leif comes back looking a little bit different, you know why. No, but I will definitely be convincing you to get on that DaRon Holmes bandwagon. I'm very high on him. I think he's a surefire NBA rotation big, potentially even starting big. But this has been the top 7 bigs. Really appreciate this. We're going to be doing this for more roles and rotations going forward. But in the meantime, go check out the Locked On Sports network for, the Locked On Sports, Locked On Sports Today. I am really struggling with words today. Locked On Sports Today. It's 24/7 free streaming. Anywhere, it's a free and available on YouTube 24/7. It's also on Amazon Fire Stick. Go check it out. We will be back with more episodes this week. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next one.